Welcome to Crossroads. New crime statistics are showing a concerning trend with illegal aliens and the incredible amount of crime they're actually committing. Also, meanwhile, it seems the issue of illegal aliens who've gotten commercial driver's licenses, which is also illegal, is a much bigger issue than we could have ever imagined. Also, on another topic, the Chinese Communist Party has been aggressively carrying out operations for transnational repression, meaning exporting its laws outside of China, including here in the United States. This has involved very aggressive attacks on human rights dissidents, human rights activists, basically anybody who's critical of the CCP. And the Chinese Communist Party is turning to even more nefarious methods, including putting hits out on people. I'll be talking about these topics and a lot more today, so make sure to hit the like button. Let's get started. All right, everyone, first off, crime stats are out, and we're getting a clearer picture of what's really been happening in this country. At least in New York, it turns out illegal aliens commit crimes at about 4 times the rate of their overall population. Now, Just the News says this. New data shows that in the state of New York, a self-designated sanctuary state, illegal immigrants make up only 3.38% to 4.15% of the state's population. I'd actually argue on whether that's accurate, which is a whole other issue, but it says, yet when compared to the number of illegals who are incarcerated, they are overrepresented in prison and jail populations by a factor of roughly 3 to 4 times. It says, furthermore, the Empire State has, according to the Department of Homeland Security, released 6,947 illegal immigrants since January 20 of this year, while still holding roughly 7,100 such individuals in its prisons and jails. Meaning, it's like 3 to 4 times the population if you go by criminals and so on. But they're also letting a lot of them out, meaning the number could actually be a lot higher. Meaning, and not all of them, but this is a large criminal population, actually. Now, it says these incarcerated illegal aliens account for approximately 14% of the total prison population of approximately 50,803, despite comprising only 3.2% to 3.38% of the state's overall population of about 19.99 million. Now, the big thing with this is that they've also just let go a lot of illegal aliens. And the fact is they're just not prosecuting a lot of them and letting them run around on our streets. Including, these are mainly the ones who are serious offenders, major criminals, and so on. Meaning, the number could actually be twice that, meaning it's a huge prison population. And, of course, a very big threat to this country. Now, I'd say this is actually concerning more than just even on the crimes themselves, right? Because generally, I think the issue is the act of illegal immigration. It displays something. It shows a person is willing to violate the laws of another country for their own personal gain. And if someone is willing to break the law for their own gain, well, what else would they do? Typically, there's a certain barrier you need to cross to become a criminal. Why do people commit crimes? Well, it's either crimes of passion. You're too caught up in the moment, you do something stupid. Or it's crimes of self-benefit. You do something because you want to make your life better. A lot of criminals make excuses for their crimes based on emotion. I was caught up in the moment, officer. I was drunk or something like that. Or they make excuses based on their conditions. I was poor. He had something I didn't have. I wanted it. Those who are willing to violate international borders, violate the law like this, have already displayed a willingness to do the latter half of that, or the former, actually, in some cases. Meaning, they've already displayed they're willing to cross that line for self-gain, meaning they're willing to be criminals, basically. And so when you have people who are of that nature representing that population, I'd say, of course, you're going to have a higher crime rate. And we are seeing that now. The other big thing, of course, too, is the way the trafficking works. They have, especially at the U.S.-Mexico border, they have to actually work with the cartels. They have to buy tickets from them to cross the border, or the cartels literally kill them. Many of them also have to borrow money, meaning through the act of being trafficked, they have to be in communication and actually work with gangs and cartels. And if you're indebted to gangs or cartels, if you're communicating with them, and this isn't even just people coming through the southern border, it's even like the Chinese triads, you call them, the snakeheads working for them, the human traffickers. these individuals require a debt, meaning they might require you to do work for them, or at the very least, you're in communication with the criminal side of things, meaning a lot of these individuals are within that circle, whether they like it or not, because of how it's set up. Now, like on that point also, though, it seems the Trump administration is going to focus its deportations more on people who commit additional crimes after coming into the United States, because it turns out, actually deporting everybody is not that popular. Fox News says this: the Department of Homeland Security is amending its immigration enforcement operations by moving away from raids targeting all illegal immigrants in the U.S. and focusing more on the ones who have committed serious offenses, according to a report. Now it says this: teams under U.S. Border Patrol Commander-at-Large Gregory Bovino will shift their focus to specific targets, including illegal immigrants who have been convicted of serious crimes, News Nation reported. Now, why is that such a big deal? It's because it looks bad in the headlines when they go and arrest, like a mom who has 3 kids who are anchor babies and they're American citizens, and they load her up on a bus and send her home, and her kids are crying, saying, "How dare you?" It looks bad. It looks bad on the Trump administration. It looks bad on the Trump administration when they round up guys sitting in front of Home Depot who are just trying to work. Now, it doesn't look bad to everybody. Some people think that's a great thing. Some people think it's a terrible thing. Most people would agree, though, that if you grab a guy who's like a rapist or killed someone in a drunk driving accident or murdered someone or is a drug dealer or goes around robbing people at gunpoint, you should probably deport them. I'd say most people agree on that. And the issue is, there's a lot of those people. There's a lot of those people actually being protected by different states. Now, what's important about being protected by different states is that you can call them undocumented migrants. Once you go through the prison system, you're kind of documented. And what normally happens is ICE will put retainers on these people saying, hey, New York Police Department, LA Police Department, we're putting a retainer on this person because we want to send him out of the country. Don't let him go. And what have New York and LA and actually many other states and cities been doing? They've been letting them go. And this is one of the big things being called out now by ICE, saying, hey, look, New York, you have convicted criminals at the rate of your current incarceration within the last year alone. For example, if you have 7,000 people in prison, you've let go about 7,000 criminals, like murderers, rapists, everything else, just within the last year, and you're just letting them go on the streets of New York. That might not be a good idea. And New York is saying, well, we're a sanctuary city, racist. Go back to your masked van and take a ride back home. And they're saying, I don't think I will, basically. What you now see in the Trump administration doing, in my opinion, is they're preparing for the midterm elections. And what does that mean? They need to do 2 things, right? The Trump administration needs to do 2 things. They need to capture the moderate voters, meaning the people in the middle who kind of swing both ways. They might say, I agree in deporting illegal aliens. I don't agree with everything. Right? Or I agree with deporting criminals, I don't agree with everything. It's kind of there's a lot of middle-of-the-road voters like that. The other side is, for the Trump base, a lot of them don't feel the Trump administration has done enough. And, they would argue on the Trump side, it's because they haven't been able to actually get most of their appointees actually appointed, Trump's nominees appointed. They've kind of been, Trump's in many ways a lame duck because of that. Not in all areas, but in many. And what the Trump administration has to do is demonstrate action to the voting base who already like him. And in order to do that, they need to do things that get headlines. And so what it seems that they're going to be taking actions on is going after the criminals that most people would agree on that we should get out of the country. Now, my personal take, this will probably not be the permanent focus. It will probably be until the midterms and a little bit after. Then they're probably going to go back to arresting and deporting all the illegal immigrants because that is the original stated purpose and intent. And also, as they round people up and deport them, they're still going to have, hey, deport yourself, please, and here's $1,000 policy, which they have been stating as well. Now, look, on another topic related, it seems the issue of illegal aliens who've gotten commercial driver's licenses, which is also illegal, is actually a pretty big deal. New York Post said that Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy threatened Friday to yank $73 million in federal highway funding meant for New York alone after an audit found more than half of the Empire State commercial trucking licenses were issued to foreign-born drivers in the U.S. illegally, meaning illegal aliens, which is illegal. They can't give those to them legally. And they say this, quote, what New York does is if an applicant comes in and they have a work authorization for 30 days, 60 days, 1 year, New York automatically issues them an 8-year commercial driver's license, meaning they can come in on a visa. They can come in temporarily and let's say they just overstay their visa, for example, or do something else. Well, technically they can't work after that time is up. But what New York does is they offer these commercial driver's licenses for an extended period of time far, far beyond that. And that's how they've been basically driving trucks and so on illegally. Now, he added, this is again Duffy, he said, that's contrary to the law, as you might suspect. And of course, this is becoming a bigger issue across the United States because you have guys driving trucks who can't, literally, they've been looking at this, can't even recognize basic road signs. When they test them on, hey, what does this sign mean? The person can't actually answer it to a very large extent. Also, meanwhile on this topic, a very large strip of land along the U.S. southern border is now getting transferred to the U.S. military. They were talking about this before. They've now kind of expanded and more heavily ingrained in the program. The Epoch Times says this, the Trump administration said on November 10th it would transfer roughly 760 acres of public land along the U.S.-Mexico border in California to the Navy for 3 years to support border security operations. It says, while announcing the decision Wednesday, the Interior Department said the land would become part of the National Defense Area, or militarized zone, to border immigration enforcement. And it says the land stretches from roughly a mile west of the California-Arizona state line to western edge of the Otay Mountain Wilderness area in San Diego and Imperial counties, according to the Interior Department. Why does that matter? Now, anybody who lives along the southern border or goes there knows there's what's called BLM, Bureau of Land Management. And, you know, it's basically government-owned land. If you've ever lived out there and you like to shoot guns, for the most part, in a lot of areas, you can legally go shoot guns. A lot of guys have like firing ranges out there and they just go shoot them out and so on. Be careful not shooting in Mexico. I know people have done it. You get in a lot of trouble. It'll ruin your day. Let's put it that way. Because sometimes they don't have a clear definition of like where the border begins and ends, and you can get yourself in a lot of trouble. But generally speaking, this is government land. Now, what does it mean if they transfer that land to the military? Basically, it becomes a militarized zone. What does that mean then? It means that for people illegally entering the United States, if they then cross that land, which is now basically a strip of land all across the southern border, they then commit the additional crime of trespassing in a militarized zone. That's why it matters. Meaning it creates an additional criminal offense and a pretty serious one for illegal immigration. If you step foot on that land, you're not just going to get a slap on the wrist and, you know, sent back. And what ends up happening, and I've been down to like Eagle Pass in parts of Mexico researching this. Border Patrol typically arrest people. They drive into the border, drop them off. The guys literally get off the bus and walk under the bridge and just illegally enter the United States again. It's like, it's just catch and release, basically. There's no real punishment for it. As soon as you let people go, they literally just do it again. And they keep doing it over and over and over again until it works because there's no punishment for it. It's a little slap on the wrist, and it means really nothing. It means basically nothing. If the military does this, though, it means people actually commit a pretty serious offense. And, you know, the other side of it is this. The military has already tried doing this. They've already been working on this. And in cases where they did arrest people, you know, illegal immigrants doing this, what ended up happening is that the courts just basically pardoned everybody's charges because, you know, the courts don't agree with this, it seems. I'm not saying all of them, but the courts that have seen the cases on this, And so even though you could argue it's a pretty big crime, American courts just don't treat it as crime. They let people off the hook. The other big thing this could mean, and we'll see if that continues, but the other big thing this could mean, though, is for cartels. Cartels and drug traffickers now designated as terrorists. Because what does it mean if you're a designated terrorist and you enter a militarized zone? Let that sink in. Okay, pop quiz. You're a designated terrorist. You enter an American military zone, American military land deemed a militarized zone. What does that mean? What do we do to terrorists? What do we do to terrorists who enter a U.S. military base? You kind of blow them up or shoot them. Meaning these guys could soon, at the U.S.-Mexico border, get the Venezuelan speedboat treatment. Meaning they might kill them. And, we'll see if they actually do it, but this would effectively give them the military rights to do so. We have not yet seen the U.S. military doing this at our southern border, but they might. They might start doing it because we do see them doing it already in the Caribbean. Now, look, also another topic, the Chinese Communist Party has been aggressively carrying out operations for transnational repression, exporting its laws right here to the United States. We'll be talking more about the methods they've been using after we come back from a quick break.
All right, just to pause here for a super quick moment. You are, of course, watching Crossroads with Joshua Philipp. I'm just here to share a message about American Hartford Gold, my own personal gold and silver bullion dealer. Now, obviously, the recent tariffs have made the markets super turbulent and volatile. With every new piece of tariff news, the markets seem to either crash up or crash down. And of course, it's worth mentioning that these conditions don't only affect Wall Street. They affect all of us through our investments and our retirement accounts. That's why I'd like to introduce you to a company that I trust and I myself use to secure my own savings, American Hartford Gold. They specialize in helping Americans move our assets into something tangible, into something you can actually hold, which is physical gold and physical silver, two precious metals that act as a hedge against all those decisions being made in Washington, D.C. They have an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. They have thousands of 5-star reviews, and they make the whole buying process super simple. Your metals can be shipped directly to your door, or you can transfer your current retirement account to a tax-advantaged gold IRA. And the best part is that right now, American Hartford Gold is offering an exclusive offer. When you call them today and you mention the name Joshua, you could receive up to $15,000 in free silver with your initial investment. Take advantage of their special offer. You can either just call them at 877-260-2764 or text Joshua to 65532. All their information will also be down in the description box below. And now, back to Crossroads.
All right, welcome back. The Chinese Communist Party has been aggressively carrying out operations for transnational repression, meaning, well, it's actually trying to persecute people outside of China. It's targeting human rights groups, it's targeting dissidents, it's targeting religious believers, it's targeting anybody critical of the CCP, including influencers and journalists. And the Chinese Communist Party is actually turning to even more nefarious methods, including putting out hits on people, saying, hey, we're going to pay to have you assassinated. Breitbart said this in the latest update. It says police in Fujian province in China, the province closest to the nation of Taiwan, announced recently that it would offer bounties for information leading to the arrest of Taiwanese YouTuber Wen Zhu, known as Pa Chuing, and rapper Chen Paoyuan, known as Mean and Wolf. It says the two men face spurious charges of spreading rhetoric advocating for resisting the Chinese mainland and other separatist acts. What do they mean by this? The Chinese Communist Party claims it owns Taiwan. There's no legal basis to this. Technically, under U.S. law, Taiwan was the official government of China because the government in exile was there, the Kuomintang. If you want to go by that argument, technically Taiwan owns China, but that's a whole other big issue. But they say, basically, the Chinese Communist Party claims it has historical ownership of Taiwan. It's going to take it by military force. And they say that Taiwanese who believe they're a country are committing a separatist act or have rhetoric resisting the Chinese mainland saying, no, we will not become part of China. Meaning just basic rhetoric, in other words. Unfortunately, the United States also now recognizes the one China policy. This was only a change made during the Carter administration. Prior to that, America recognized Taiwan as the official government of China. That was actually the U.S. stance until Carter, and Carter changed all that. Now look, back to this, so it says Chinese law enforcement authorities disparage the content creators who have grown an online influence in Taiwan, calling for opposition to communist influence as hitmen and accomplices of Taiwanese independence who exercise a malign influence. It says the Chinese state newspaper China Daily, in reporting on the Bounty on Thursday, did not offer any accusations of actual crimes by the men involved, only accusations of splitting the country and inciting national division. Now, why does this matter? It's because this is not just about Taiwan. When the CCP is putting bounties on people, arrest them, bring them to China to face criminal charges, they even do that here in the United States. There's a program the CCP had called Operation Fox Hunt, and agents of the Ministry of State Security were actually deploying to the United States openly. This was known. It was even allowed to happen during the Obama administration. Operation Fox Hunt. Deploying to the United States. And they were going after people who were, the CCP wanted to bring back, whether it was dissidents, whether it was advocates against the CCP, people exposing it, or whether it was people being charged with anti-corruption campaigns type stuff, which was just political purges and so on. They were sending agents here, and they were threatening people's families, saying, hey, we're going to punish you unless your father goes back to China to be basically executed. Or they go to people here and say, hey, we're going to persecute your family in China unless you come back or commit suicide. And that was how they were doing transnational repression. The Chinese Communist Party has actually expanded this. There's also under the Ministry of the Policing Department, they run what are known as these Chinese secret police stations. They even have phone numbers set up where members of the Chinese community can call to report on other members of the Chinese community. So if you, for example, go to a democracy event, if you go to a human rights event, if you become outspoken against the CCP, members of the Chinese community can go to one of these centers which operate even openly. Some of them have been shut down by the US, some of them have not. That operate openly, or call the phone number they have. They have a hotline, and you can report other members of your community to either be harassed in China, arrested when they go back, if they go back, or face other kind of pressure from within. You even have groups facing death threats, bomb threats, rape threats. Many of you have seen Shen Yun Performing Arts. They're, again, a performing arts company based in New York. Constantly, they face death threats, bomb threats, and rape threats from the Chinese Communist Party. In fact, some of these have even been traced back to Huawei. Again, Taiwan actually traced some of these bomb threats back to a company tied to Huawei in China. And so the CCP is trying to attack people here. It's trying to rally its troops to go after people even within the United States. I personally have been targeted by some of this going back several years. There were Chinese agents threatening to kill me, to my face, threatening to kill me because I was exposing the United Front. So this is very, very real. Now, also on this though, some of this also involves information campaigns. And the CCP is even using now fake information, spreading rumors about people, attacking people's reputations. In one of the most recent cases, the Chinese Communist Party has used AI to create fake images to frame a critic. And here's what it said. This is according to CBC in Canada. Yao Zhang says she doesn't have any friends, yet every week thousands of her 175,000 YouTube subscribers tune in to her channel to listen to her live takes on Chinese current affairs. She said, quote, China is not a democratic country. Everyone suffers in that regime. And she told this to Radio Canada during an interview held somewhere between Montreal and Quebec City. She has to keep her location private. Now it says, concerned for her safety, the 39-year-old guards any information that could give away her location. She's in Canada, right? It says, and for good reason. The Quebec YouTuber who refuses to be silenced has been the target of an intimidation campaign by the Chinese government for over a year. It says, trained in accounting at McGill University, Zhang did a 180 during the pandemic and began offering news commentary on YouTube, which she continues to do today. YouTube, by the way, has actually gone after and suppressed many YouTube channels critical of the CCP while promoting many that are positive on the CCP. Many YouTubers, including, for example, YaoY86, I believe it is, and China Uncensored, both critical of the CCP, have actually claimed that they've been suppressed, and they've actually shown evidence that YouTube is suppressing them while promoting pro-CCP accounts with almost no following or traction, suggesting that YouTube is up to some weird, funny business. But it says this as well. The Communist Party of China and President Xi Jinping are often the subjects of her criticism. And it says further in, it was on September 2024 that Zhang first noticed sexually explicit AI-generated images of herself circulating online. And she said it wasn't just one photo, there were many, many of them. She remembered what discussed. Meaning, it turns out the CCP is creating AI images of her, trying to manufacture a sex scandal, trying to ruin her reputation. Further, it states for the YouTuber, there was no doubt the People's Republic of China was behind what she was seeing, and she was right. In March, Global Affairs Canada released a statement blaming the PRC, the Chinese Communist regime, for a new spamouflage campaign using sexually explicit AI-generated images to target individuals in Canada. Zhang says the government told her she is the first documented case of the campaign. Meaning, if you are critical of the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, according to Canadian government sources now, and shown now publicly through evidence, the Chinese Communist Party is manufacturing sex scandals using artificial intelligence, targeting critics. Now further, and it states this, notably, Zhang and members of her family have been doxxed, meaning they revealed their private information and location. Her date of birth, phone, and passport numbers all appear on a doxing website that labels her as a traitor. And if you get that, you can actually cause people a lot of trouble. It says the site, which is still accessible to this day, also uses degrading language to spread defamatory, sexually explicit statements about her. And so the CCP is trying to also, in addition to going after people, threatening people, intimidating people, having, again, secret police stations, targeting people, reporting people, and so on, harassing them, even has information campaigns, defaming people, targeting people, trying to ruin their reputation. Actually, this happened to me similarly several years back. Not to this extent, but there were Chinese accounts that were spreading false quote memes of me, where they were taking my face and doing like the quote bubbles next to it of things I never said. And they were trying, they never got traction, so I never bothered doing anything about it. But it turned out they were doing that. And it turned out the same organization that was doing that was even publishing through organizations that do like statements or, like articles that get syndicated, false reports about the Epoch Times, some of which even got caught up in news syndicators, and we actually got them to pull them down because it was defamatory and fake. And actually some of these sites initially refused until we proved that it was false information, and then they pulled them down. But there was a false information campaign against us and against myself and against other critics of the CCP at that time. So the CCP has been doing this. They actually have been doing this for a long time now. Now, like also with the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party is doing something else. It's actually helping Iran rebuild its ballistic missiles. And the United States did something interesting. It actually intercepted one of the CCP's shipments to Iran. The Telegraph says this, Donald Trump's administration is taking an increasingly interventionist maritime strategy. It says the operation took place weeks before the U.S. on Wednesday seized a sanctioned oil tanker near Venezuela, which had been used to transport oil to Iran. It says Iran is attempting to rebuild its shattered ballistic missile arsenal, having bombarded Israel with around 500 during their 12-day war in June, which didn't do so well, by the way. It says roughly 1,000 more are estimated to have been destroyed in Israeli strikes. It says the UN imposed an arms embargo on Iran and a ban on uranium enrichment and activity related to ballistic missiles capable of carrying nuclear weapons. It says in January 2024, U.S. Central Command confiscated ballistic and cruise missiles components made in Iran and bound for Houthi rebels off the coast of Somalia. Why is that a big deal? Basically what this means, Iran supports the global terror movement, whether it is Hezbollah, whether it's the Houthis, whether it's other regimes, even targeting the United States. Bombing U.S. ships, raiding people. It's kind of a big deal. This is the Somalis and the Houthis, because we even saw Minnesota pouring money in there through Somali scammers. But what this means is that Iranian support for terrorism is being fueled by Chinese Communist Party shipments, meaning the CCP is the real hand of the global terror movement, supporting Iran and using Iran as the proxy to do it elsewhere. And the U.S. is actually now doing something to stop it. It says the United States seized Iranian oil shipments from several tankers in 2020 and 2023, claiming they were violating sanctions that proceeds would be used to fund Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which the U.S. and several other countries have named a designated terrorist organization. Meaning this is also a Biden policy, because some of that happened under Biden, but they're continuing this now under Trump and maybe going after it a bit more. This could also tie into what's happening in Venezuela, I'd say. Daily Mail says this: a menacing shadow fleet of Iranian-linked tanker ships is operating in the Caribbean, sparking alarm amid ongoing U.S. military action in the region. It says despite a long history of brazenly transporting sanctioned Iranian oil, the vessels have been sailing just miles from the American coastline as President Trump continues his unrelenting bombardment of alleged drug boats. It says a bombshell report obtained exclusively by the Daily Mail exposes a deep, clandestine network of 20 illicit tankers currently lurking in Caribbean waters, serving as a lifeline to the regimes of Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro and Iran and Russia. Basically meaning, what is the economy of Venezuela? Well, it's oil and it's drugs. Now, Iranian oil shipments are actually kind of keeping the economy going in Venezuela, and our Chinese, by the way. They use what are called black ships, or they call them ghost ships or dark ships. They're ships that go to that region, turn off their trackers, and then go and sail down, get that oil, and violate American sanctions. Why did you have your beacon off? No reason at all, Inspector. And basically, they just go and violate sanctions. That's how they're doing it. This has been keeping the Venezuelan economy going. Venezuela trades with Cuba, it trades with Iran, to an extent with Russia, but Russia's also an oil country, and they kind of compete more with Venezuela. But through these types of purchases, they're able to keep going. The regimes are able to keep up. The other core part of the Venezuelan economy is drugs, and Trump's been blowing those up. And what this tells me, at least, they're kind of cutting off the Venezuelan economy. What happens when the economy is cut off? Well, there's no more money. What happens when money is cut off? Well, people go hungry. What happens when you have a lot of hungry people who don't like the government? Well, it might not turn out so well for that government. And so what does that mean? Venezuela, where there's a lot of social unrest, might have a lot more social unrest. And what happens when there's social unrest? Well, somebody might come in and fan those flames and say, hey, flames get bigger. And when they get bigger, what happens? You have regime change. We might see Venezuela regime change caused by this and maybe some other things at work. We shall have to wait and see. All right, when that's said, questions, comments, anything you want to talk about, leave it in the chat. Let's jump into some questions. And let's see here. First question, Callie CYD, you're saying, I guess this trend is why I haven't seen harpings on the illegals commit crimes less than citizens lately. Now you don't hear anything. I've seen people say that. Actually, one of the when I was researching the documentary for Charlie Kirk, I was watching some of his last events where he was, doing the debate me type things at universities. One of the last debates he had was with a kid who was, making arguments against, or, for, in favor of mass migration and illegal immigration. And he was basically saying that based on statistics, illegal immigrant communities have less crime represented than like other American groups, less crime than the general population of America. And Charlie basically said, "You say that, but I don't believe the statistics," basically. And that's a hard thing you have to go by, right? When you have a lot of public debates and media narratives, the problem you have is sometimes the narratives are based on statistics or information, and there are a lot of ways you can lie through statistics. Sometimes the organizations collecting the data have an agenda, and they're not going to show the real data. Sometimes they kind of skew the results by doing false comparisons. And so, for example, if you have higher crime demographics in America, they'll compare the numbers to those demographics and not to like general population or something like that. They use various methods to make it appear that their side looks better. There are a lot of ways you can lie through statistics. And what we're seeing now is that statistically, and actually because of a lot of other issues, let me get first into the statistics. The problem with these statistics is that a lot of crime has not been prosecuted. The problem with these statistics is a lot of crime has been downgraded. We see this now reported in Washington, D.C., for example, where whistleblowers have come forward, and it's now generally known, while Washington, D.C. was saying, "We don't have a crime problem. What are you talking about?" It turns out that police were downgrading crimes. Not the police officers wanting to do it for the most part, but supervisors, people in charge, and so on. Meaning they have a crime problem, but it doesn't show up in statistics. You have the same thing in New York. You have the same thing in Los Angeles, where they've made laws, for example, where if a 14-year-old illegal alien goes and robs someone at gunpoint, it's not called a crime. It's catch and release. So what does that mean? It means gangs like Tren de Aragua, MS-13, and a lot of other street gangs are just hiring underage people, 14-year-olds, 17-year-olds, to go and be their foot soldiers, rob people, steal cars, and everything else, which is why I keep seeing kids doing it. And because of the laws of the state or the city, where they don't treat basically, underage crime as real crime, it's a slap on the wrist. You get kids getting off on major crimes, and it's not really documented as crime. And this has become a huge problem with the illegal alien communities. Same thing with a lot of other crimes, drunk driving, theft, where they've just effectively decriminalized some of these things for illegal alien populations. You just don't, and it's catch and release on a lot of other things. Not to mention the idea that sometimes, as has been revealed in Washington, D.C., even if you get convicted on a major crime, they just pardon it, excuse it, or drop it, or downgrade it. Notably, I'm sure many of you have heard about what's happening with these Somalis in Minnesota being accused of just massive financial fraud, stealing money from Obamacare subsidies, stealing money from, COVID kickbacks and so on, stealing money all over the place, falsifying data on, issues being handicapped, or they're saying, "Hey, my kid is autistic," just on a mass scale committing fraud, at least $1 billion in fraud. Now you might say, well, people are being arrested, people are being prosecuted, don't blame the whole community because, criminals are being prosecuted. It turns out they're not. What has been happening is that people who are getting arrested in little Somalia, little Mogadishu, they're going in Minnesota, and the judge, even when the jury is finding these individuals guilty, the judge is excusing the cases. The judge is letting them off. This has happened several times now on multi-million-dollar fraud cases. The judges are just letting them off the hook. And so, that goes back to the problem of statistics. If you count this all in statistics, how do you judge it? There's a problem with the system that would document crimes in the first place, so the statistics don't show us anything. They're not reliable. And the problem is, even the statistics we have look pretty dang bad. That is the problem. And so that's where things are at with it. Cassandra Olympiad, you say, in the USA, Barrio 18 are seen as criminals. In Canada, they're seen as asylum seekers, and allows them to sell death drugs to thousands and thousands of Canadians for 20 years unimpeded. Funny about that. I believe Barrio 18 is a gang, right? I'm not familiar with them in Canada, but you do have this in the United States too. I know Canada has some pretty big problems when it comes to how they regard, they have different standards in how they regard criminal, illegal alien populations. It's the same thing in parts of Europe, right? I mean, heck, it's the same thing in parts of the US. Like, who are we kidding? In Canada, as well as in parts of Western Europe, you have the problem that major organized crime groups get a relative free pass because of policies to protect illegal alien populations. Sometimes in the reporting on crimes, they do not document who the people are committing the crimes, unless they're the native inhabitants of those countries. If a white guy says something mean on the internet, you're probably going to know his name. If a migrant goes and stabs somebody, you're probably not going to know his name. Let's put it that way. And so because they don't want the population becoming mad about it. They don't want people blaming the entire population of people because of that. And so the governments, in order to guard against hate, conceal oftentimes the identities of the criminals, right? They still prosecute the crimes in many cases, but they'll hide the identities in order to protect the criminal population, or in order to protect the migrant populations, because they don't want people blaming all of them for the actions of a handful of people. But it also leads into other things where, as you're mentioning in Canada, you end up getting criminals who don't really get much punishment. There's not a lot of things going after them. And part of the reason for that, this is an unfortunate reason, a lot of times within certain migrant populations or illegal alien populations, you do have very broad criminal pockets, and the communities end up getting somewhat tied in with them pretty heavily. This is the case for a lot of migrant populations. Look, it's not even just a race thing. The Italians used to have a problem with it with the Italian mafia. The Chinese have a problem with it with the snakeheads and the triads, the United Front. A lot of the population is deeply tied in with the United Front because of the tongs and the way it's set up. It's just part of the problem. At least the ones who are illegal aliens. Same thing with a lot of the Hispanic population. A lot of them are tied in with cartels and gangs. It's very common that, even if you're fine, you very likely have a cousin or a family member who's part of a gang. It's very common. Look, I grew up like this too. I live in San Diego. I have friends and family who are part of that. It's just part of, it's very common, right? And so the problem is, especially when you go to these population centers, when you start going after these people, it does represent a pretty broad population. And it even ties into some of the illegal working systems. For example, in New York City, if you're an illegal immigrant and you want to work, what do you need? You need to commit fraud. You need to get a stolen identity. You need to get registered in different programs. Many of them get stolen social security numbers, get programs to register for things. They have to go through traffickers. And that means you have to work with criminals. And there's a weird understanding in many places, and this is unfortunate, and I don't know if this is the reason, but I assume this is my personal understanding. Sometimes police don't go after those people because they are cornerstones of allowing illegal aliens to work. They don't go after the guy selling stolen social security numbers on the streets of, Junction Boulevard in New York City. I've seen it personally. The police will stand right next to them and not arrest them. Why is that? It's because those people, I believe, are cornerstones of this kind of illicit, underbelly of the system, frankly. And because of that, you see a lot of gang members, a lot of crime basically go unpunished. It is an unfortunate reality. Jen Reinbold, you're saying, CCP has the facile idea. What's mine is mine, what's yours is mine, and what theirs is mine. Yeah, it's communist sharing, meaning I get what you have and you don't get what I have. You should share everything with me, or I'll take it by force. No, I'm not going to share what I have with you. That is the nature of the communist regime. It's for the people, comrade. Enjoy the gulag while I take everything you own and take it for myself. That is good old-fashioned communist redistribution. It's some people have also called communism being generous with other people's money, right? It's basically it basically works like a cartel, right? A lot of people who defected from China, a lot of the immigrant populations who are very critical of the CCP, they refer to the Chinese Communist Party as a mafia state. And this is basically how communism works in general. Communism is a mafia state. And effectively what it does in terms of policy is it makes deals with people. If you've been in any kind of organization, when people want you to get involved in a crime, what do they say? Hey, turn your head this way at 8 o'clock on Sunday. You don't have to look, you don't have to be involved, and you're going to get $200 or a cut. Hey, open the door to the vault at 2 p.m., turn off the cameras at 1 p.m., and you're going to get a cut of what is taken. Hey, steal this car, we have resellers, they'll give you a 20% cut. Any kind of criminal operation involves people involved getting a certain kickback. That's the way communist policy also works. Vote for me and I'll steal the wealth of the billionaires and millionaires and I'll give some to you. Vote for me and I will create free food grocery stores. Vote for me and we'll go and pillage the landlords and take their properties and I'll give you a little bit. Maybe I'll give you free rent or something like that. At least for some of you, right? Vote for me or help us in the revolution and we'll kill the people who have, in ways that we say are, unhonest or whatever, taken from you, who've made your lives more hard. Every communist policy, every communist campaign, every communist genocide has a certain narrative like this. And it also applies to socialist politics, where the entire narrative is, vote for me and I'll give you free stuff, right? That is the communist promise. And it only works so long as there's someone to rob. This is the irony and the kind of death, the death counter on any communist policy. It only works so long as there is somebody to rob. The whole policy of rob the billionaires and tax the billionaires only works so long as there are billionaires. As soon as billionaires stop seeing a point of being billionaires, the billionaires go away and the policies die. New York wanting to massively tax businesses only works so long as the big businesses stay in New York. If they leave the state, you lose the money. And because, again, the whole thing works on vote for me, help me, work with me, get involved in this crime with me, and we'll rob this person and I'll give you a kickback. That is the way communist policy works. That's the way gangs work. That's the way mafias work. Ashley from California, you're saying China isn't democratic? You don't say, right? It says, say it louder for the kinds back in the back to hear. Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, democratic, right? It's kind of, so you're talking, of course, about this Canadian YouTuber who's facing like a transnational repression campaign from the CCP, manufacturing sex scandals and humiliating her and publishing information online because she said basic things like China is not a democratic country. In China, where if you believe in democracy, it's actually a crime. Did you know in China that if you believe in democracy, they call it an evil cult? The CCP, it's because it's a damning label in a lot of other countries. Any group they don't like, they call it a cult. They call house Christians cults. They call Falun Gong practitioners cults. They call democracy activists cults. It means nothing. It's a label. But what happens is in other countries, a lot of the stupid media picks up the labels and just reports it. There's no ground to it. I would actually say the Chinese Communist Party itself is an evil cult. It requires you to study its scriptures. If you try to leave, it punishes you. It abuses you if you don't believe in it enough. It kills you. It persecutes you. It controls you. The Chinese Communist Party is, in every definition, an evil cult. And they call every group that tries to have a value that it doesn't recognize, how dare you believe in Christianity that the regime doesn't recognize? You can practice the CCP's version of it, which is an altered religion, or you can practice the real one, but they're going to call you a cult and try to kill you for it. The CCP is an evil cult, and they call good people cultists because of that, because it's a damning label. It is a label that people in other countries hear, and they assume you're bad no matter what. That's how the CCP does a lot of its information campaigns. And you see media doing it all the time, where they say the Chinese government regards this group as a cult. They call democracy a cult. And so why do they go after people saying the CCP is not democratic and persecute them as well? It's because what a real cult does, and the CCP is a cult, is it also targets people who do anything, criticize it. Well, you see legitimate religions do that too. But going after people and trying to kill them if they try to, again, spread anything that's true about them and show what's really going on. That's what the CCP is doing. Enthos 32, you're saying, my nephew is in his second year of college. He now believes the CCP doesn't have a social credit score, says it's debunked. He also now admires Xi and Putin. What do you think, Josh? I would question where he heard these narratives, because it's kind of crazy, right? I would say a few things. Part of the problem is this. You have a socialist... Okay, so a lot of the school system, what do they teach kids? They are telling them that America is evil, American colonialism is the problem for everything, white people are the problem, white colonialism is what caused all the problems in the world, not communist revolutions, terrorist organizations, drug trade, and so on. Because, look, if you want to get into the whole narrative of America as the world police, who have we been going after? Communist revolutionaries, genocidal regimes, terrorists who want to kill innocent people, and drug traffickers. What were they doing without the United States? They were nailing people to crosses. They were melting people in vats of acid, like ISIS. They were mass murdering people, like you see happening right now in Somalia, in Nigeria, where they're killing so many Christians. It is literally visible. The blood is visible from space. You can actually see the truckloads of dead bodies in pools of blood, literally visible from space. It's things like, for example, genocides under the Chinese Communist Party, mass starvation, mass persecutions. It's genocides like what took place in Cambodia through the Khmer Rouge, killing roughly a third of the population. It's genocides like in Holodomor. It's genocides like in, for example, North Korea. It's genocides like, for example, in every communist country. It's narco-terrorist operations throughout Latin America, killing people, murdering people, robbing people, establishing networks of corruption, compromising governments. It's regimes like the North Vietnamese, who mass murdered people, killed anybody who worked with the Americans, and made people become the boat people to escape from it. It is absolute horrors. And if you want to say America is bad for killing those people, so be it. But which one was it the wrong, right? Is it the people who are doing these things, or is it the people who tried to stop them? You tell me. But what kids have been taught is this. They've been taught that America is the evil ones, and the communist leaders and all these other people are the ones who've been doing that. That they're somehow right, and it's America's fault for this. Even leading up to current times, right? Where they think, for example, pirates are the people fighting against the evil West. Where they think the Houthis are just, friendly tribesmen forced into such situations. There's all kinds of stuff like this, right? And so what you're seeing is kids being taught this alternative worldview. Now, the problem is when they're being taught that in the schools and they start believe that America is the wrong one, American history is wrong, the American founding fathers were evil slave owners. And yes, China has slavery literally right now as we speak, but don't look at the man behind the curtain. Not that slavery, right? Not that colonialism. They don't recognize that. China actually has modern day colonialism in Latin America and Africa, by the way, and slavery. Don't look at the man behind the curtain. But they're told these narratives, and then what happens is there's online influencers who they get pulled into who take it even further. And they start to actually believe this stuff. So there's the disinformation system. You can blame New York Times and the 1619 Project for a lot of that getting implemented through Common Core education. And you have now entire generations of people who've gone through that system since the second half of the Obama administration, educated on that, believe it, who've now become college professors and they're teaching it, or school teachers and they're teaching it. And this is the worldview. And you have entire generations now, 2 generations even, who've been raised within this worldview. The American idea is being assassinated through this false information. And will they ever pull out of it? I don't know. I don't know, unless something is done to actually kind of begin educating a new generation and getting rid of these crazy false information policies that have been basically spread through the American school system. We'll have to see. Another question from Enthos32. You're saying, I invited him and his girlfriend to Shenyun. How nice. He said, Josh, do you happen to have a discount code for Epic subscribers? Yeah, actually, yes, we do. I don't say it enough. So Epic Times is a sponsor of Shenyun Performing Arts. So look, I believe exposing Chinese transnational repression, but we are also a sponsor of Shenyun Performing Arts, and have been almost from the beginning. So if any of you do want to see Shenyun, I've seen it many times, I highly recommend it. The reason the Chinese Communist Party persecutes Shenyun and literally threatens theaters, bomb threats, death threats, and the whole 9 yards, slashes people's tires of the buses for Shenyun, targets them constantly, does false information hit pieces against them, even carried in major American news outlets. The New York Times has even spread just false report after false report against them. The reason the Chinese Communist Party hates Shenyun so much is because Shenyun shows the culture of China the Chinese Communist Party tried to destroy, and Shenyun also exposes what's happening in current day China. The CCP hates them for it. It shows the true religious tradition of China. It shows the cultural foundations of China, and it shows the side of China the Chinese Communist Party has done everything it can to wipe off the face of the earth. So I highly recommend it. If you want to see that, we actually do have a discount ticket. You can go to shenyun.com, SHENYUN.com. And I have a code, Josh26, JOSH26. And their season is just about to start. They actually sell out really quick, so if you haven't got, they really do sell out quick. They tend to sell out in most theaters, so like if you want to see it, you should actually get the ticket early. JOSH26, if you want a discount code on that, it actually helps me as well. So again, I recommend it not just because I have a discount code, but because I've seen it many times. I do like it quite a bit. SHENYUN.com. And again, the Chinese Communist Party does not want you to see this show because the Chinese Communist Party fears it, which is all the more reason to go see it. All right, that said, everyone, happy Monday. I hope you had a great weekend. Christmas is coming up soon, right? As is Turning Point. I'll be there actually this week. So if any of you are at Turning Point, be sure to stop by the Epic Times booth as well. Thank you so much for being here. Always a pleasure, and I will see you again tomorrow. So join me 10:30 a.m. Eastern Time, and as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.